So, in a world where we're seeing changes in culture, the way we collaborate, the way businesses hopefully will become more profitable, more efficient, it's really important to kind of delve into what the challenges are, what the benefits are, of course, but how the future of this all looks. So to start us off, I'd like each of you gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind, to just introduce yourselves, and then we'll get cracking with this brilliant conversation.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Yusuf Jazakala. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Recruitment Smart Technologies. So it's a scale-up. We are based in the city of London, and we automate the end-to-end talent acquisition process for large organizations. Typically, candidate sourcing, candidate screening, video interviewing, and all the way from identifying a candidate before he joins the company up to the stage when they actually join the company. So it's a talent acquisition automation, and we use agentic solutions, specifically for large enterprises who are hiring more than 500 people every year. And I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rich Merritt. I'm the head of AI at Bellrock. We're a facilities management company. I've been riding the wave of technology and innovation for a little while. I was with JP and Pete when voice technology was kicking off. I've been working with generative AI now for through a couple of organisations, and it is relevant later for some of the stuff I think I'll talk about, but I was a teacher at some point.
Hey, my name is Sam Gilstrap. I'm the CEO of a company called Asset Logic. We provide data infrastructure for the asset management industry. So companies like BlackRock and Goldman and Vanguard trust us with some of their most sensitive data to make sure it only goes to the right places with a full audit trail. And I'm here today. We've been working with KPMG to develop a transformation process to basically to provide the data foundation for asset management members of the asset management industry to build AI on, and that's why I'm here.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Rich, let's start with you. Let's kick off by looking at kind of this current state of play with businesses adopting AI. You can use some of your teaching skills here if we need it. We hear a lot about this AI-ready culture, but it's often quite an abstract term. So what does it actually look like on the ground in an organization that's getting it right? And actually, what are the clearest signals that a company is fundamentally getting it wrong?
So let's start with the companies getting it right. So I've done this in a couple of places now. I think the thing that I've noticed is if you're doing AI right, you're focusing on the people first. And a few people have mentioned today that people are a really important part of this journey. I'd say 80% of the problem is a people problem, and only 20% is the tech. We know the tech can do what it can do. JP's just told us all the cool stuff that is available. So the way that I approach this now in two organisations, and I've got evidence of this sitting in the room as well, someone that I used to work with is sat over there and can be testament to this working, is approaching the people in four different ways. It's not just, as JP said, it's not just giving someone an e-learning piece of e-learning and learning that way. You need to really embrace AI and really get organisations and people within the organisation understanding it. So the way we do it, 4 different streams. So webinars every 9 months, kind of drop in, but can top people up on what's happening in the world, giving updates on things like OpenClaw, updates on things like the latest Claude release, but nothing too strenuous. The other way is workshops with anyone with managerial responsibility, because they've got different metrics, right? They've got different understanding of what they need to do. We need to understand, how do we measure ROI? What are the different ways that you can measure it? How can you train up? How can you get your teams working with AI effectively and properly, and getting people really engaged? The next way is hackathons. They're not really hackathons at all. They're more state-of-the-art-athons, where you take teams out of their day-to-day life, put them in the room with an expert, an AI expert, and kind of look at the use cases. What are the problems? All the things that we know we can solve. How can we solve that with AI? And how can we build something in that room? Nothing magic, but just something simple that in that room you can take, and you can, from the inside out, you can get people excited about AI, and they can use it the next day in their job. The most important thing, and I think the thing that I've found the most valuable, and I say Alistair over there is testament to this, is AI champions. Now, not AI champions in the way that kind of the corny way that a lot of businesses will say it, but taking 1 or 2 people per team, no more. I did that very wrong at one business. Had 119 champions in the first cohort. That was a terrible idea. But 1 or 2 per team, taking them, training them up, explaining them how to use AI properly, effectively, within the governance framework that is set up, but giving them access to some other tooling, giving them something specific that they can do that other people in the organisation can't do. Once you've given them access to that tooling, you then are also, they're the point of kind of contact within that team. They can build out some of those AI solutions. They can look, you train them up on how to understand return on investment, whether that is pound note value or whether that's operational value or whatever else that happens to be, and get them to understand that. So you've got top down from the workshops, bottom up from the AI champions, and inside out from those hackathons. And that way is a way of really building that culture. In terms of where it fails, I say any company that's trying to measure AI by the token count or by the usage and the output are probably not going to have a very successful AI journey.
And Sam, what is the single biggest operational bottleneck that prevents enterprise AI from moving past the experimentation phase and into that kind of more meaningful daily production workflow, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest impediment to actually using AI meaningfully is your data foundation. And we've heard it talked a lot about today in this previous sessions. I work in an industry that in asset management where the information has to be correct. It can't not be wrong. And so you put a ceiling on any usefulness of any tool you have, but especially AI, if that's not done right. And so we have a saying we like to say at our office a little bit is that we're in a $120 trillion industry that actually has no data infrastructure at all. It's our industry's dirty little secret, and it turns out that AI is the most likely tool to expose that secret to the world is when we try to give some data that's not very good to it and have it do something helpful. And so when I see the impediment is AI, when you give it in a proof of concept situation and you give it a very tidy little data set to give you a nice answer on, it will give you a great answer. But for this industry, and certainly if your industries are ones where the information has to be right, you need to spend some time to make sure that it can call a single source of truth data set that it will always give you the right answer.
Thank you. And Yusuf, I mean, you're working with the teams, with the recruitments there as well. Do you think that companies with AI at the moment are kind of running before they can walk? Because there was a moment where everyone's like, I've got to have AI, I've got to have AI. And then suddenly, has that caused more damage than maybe, taking a slower approach?
The short answer is yes, but it's not a technology issue. A lot of the companies, they are basically implementing these AI tools, and they're not changing the job behind those AI tools. So if you are implementing something, you need to modify the process. You need to modify the job descriptions. You need to modify and train the people who are actually doing the job. Because otherwise, if you just bolt on AI to an existing process which is already broken, then you should not be surprised that it doesn't work. So a very relevant example I can give you is when we implement our solution, so typically in the recruitment process, the old school way of doing things that people are used to is that, they would advertise the job, and then obviously, you will have all these candidates applying, and then the recruiters will schedule a meeting with the hiring manager next week. So let's say if they do it on Monday, then they will schedule a meeting next Monday to actually review the candidates and, and see, okay, which ones do we actually take forward. But now with the advent of AI, when we implement a tool, they're still following the same process. But in reality, they would get the candidates within minutes. So they're still waiting for a week to schedule those meetings. And then when I looked at the data after the first month, I was thinking, okay, the time to hire is not dropping at all. But we would typically see a 50% reduction. And then I sat down, with the talent acquisition team, and I figured out that they had not actually changed the process after implementing the tool. So this is one of the fundamental, biggest problems. that you should not be bolting AI onto a broken process.
Yeah, so we need to we do need to take a sort of a slower approach. I mean, are you guys seeing that as well? Are you seeing businesses running before they can walk, particularly, I suppose, Sam, in an industry, like you say, that has to be incredibly down to the T with the numbers and everything like that? Are we rushing ahead too much right now?
There are firms that are. And people get quite excited about AI and believe it can help with a lot. And stumbling with AI is pretty damaging. And it's unfair to the technology. And the way we've seen it stumble, at least in our industry, is it just gets information wrong. And you give information to a client, you give information to a regulator, you make a report, and you give it to someone, and it's just not right. And it takes as much effort or more to use AI and then to make sure it's right than it does to just do it the way you used to. And that's where they're failing. So they ask it to do a little too much, a little too quickly.
And actually, one of the things that we're going to talk about, and Rich, I think this is particularly your area, is governance, right? This is incredibly important, probably not implemented as much as it should be in some industries right now. But I mean, let's look at the challenges that we face, because the culture, the clients, how can organizations create a balance between establishing strict AI governance frameworks to mitigate the risk, but without completely sort of stifling the innovation of it and the excitement around it? How do we kind of strike that balance?
It is a massive challenge. And Lisa touched on it first thing this morning when she kind of talked about the governance can't keep up. The key that I found to success in this, to be able to innovate at pace, is you've got to turn those no people into yes people, right? The people that tend to be in charge of governance, they're trained to say no. InfoSec directors, DPOs, it's their bread and butter. So the way that I go back to what I said at the beginning, it's a people issue. Training up people on how to use this stuff effectively. So what I kind of took a two-pronged approach at both the places that I've implemented AI strategies, and both of them started off right from the ground up, saying like this AI policy needs to be written. It's not an InfoSec policy with an AI T-shirt on. This is an AI first policy that actually does encourage innovation, and the way to encourage that is by defining overarching use cases that you can then attribute levels of risk to, so that people can input different levels of data depending on the level of risk. That works quite well. The other thing is then setting up some sort of regular forum between the tech guys, the guys that are actually doing all the implementation, and those no people, and making sure that you are all aligned on what's what, and you're working together to try and drive the business forward. The last thing is kind of, okay, earlier I mentioned kind of hackathons. One of the things that I found really successful with InfoSec teams at both businesses that I've done this with is taking them out for a day or a couple of days, looking at some of what are their pain points. How can we solve their pain points with AI? We completely revamped the supplier due diligence process at one of the businesses because it was a broken process, kind of to your point, Youssef, right? And we then looked at ways that we could use AI to do that. It wasn't complicated. It was as simple as using like a custom GPT and some deep research. But it allowed them to be able to see the benefits, see the potential, and then be able to move forward with that in a way that they were a bit more comfortable saying yes. So it's a people problem again. It's like turning those yes people into no people allows you to then be able to move forward. And the key is having those risk categories as well to be able to really define who can do what when.
And I suppose going back to you, Sam, as well, in a really high stakes environment like the finance sector, the infrastructure that needs to be built there, not just converting no people into yes people and vice and working around that, in a quite archaic structure as well, something that hasn't been changed in decades and decades. AI moves really fast. I've been interviewing some of the people here today over there who have been just saying that they're quite surprised at how quickly everything is moving with AI. How does that translate into the finance sector and changing the infrastructure that's been around for so long? Are you finding that that's more of a challenge, or is it actually more surprisingly embraced?
I don't think there's a challenge with people wanting to use AI. I think I'm seeing people finding it challenging having AI add the value to the tasks they're doing that they hoped for. And so in terms of, I'll give you a good example of one of our customers. They started actually using AI about 4 years ago, pretty early in the LLM, and They used our technology for a data infrastructure, and they added on top of that, this is for their client reporting. They have hundreds of millions and billions of dollars need to report to institutional investors. They used our technology to make sure that the data was correct. And then they actually, for all of these hundreds of reports, they had to do a narrative to describe what the market's doing and this and that. And they plugged all that, and by having that AI, even this is generations ago, calling the right data every time, and then using the LLM side, which at that time was just good enough, they were able to have a very good experience, and it's only gotten better and better. So they didn't ask AI to do something. They didn't ask AI to fix their bad data. And for my industry, that's not going to work. You actually not just need to have the correct data, you need to have an audit trail that data is correct and where you got it from with the full provenance. That's the foundation that a shortcut you just can't really make.
There's a lot of nodding here, guys. Do you have anything you want to add to that from your side?
I think I would just change the framing of the question slightly, because compliance and good governance actually enables movement. It enables the innovation, and bad governance actually stifles. So I wouldn't see compliance as something bad. In fact, to give you an analogy, because I'm a car person, compliance and governance is like a seat belt. It's your guardrails. It's to make organizations and the car safer to drive for the passengers. It should not be seen as a speed limit, as something that limits you. So yeah, that would be my example.
And Rich, have you got anything to add?
No, I mean, I've been really fortunate at the places that I've worked have really good data teams, and you're spot on, right? You need to have that really good data to be able to do anything effectively throughout this entire journey. You can almost tier it as to the big projects do require that. They use little things here and there that need the people expertise, but the people then are the data. It's that human interface. So yeah, no, I think that it is vital for that good data.
Yusuf, just back to you a little bit. Looking back at the decision you made around moving sort of AI adoption into your organisation, was there anything that, looking back on that transition, that you would have done differently? Like, what have been your key learnings?
Yeah, I think, this is a really good question, because the biggest issue that we have is around authenticity that we talked about earlier, where I think one of the product manager from TikTok said, okay, why was TikTok more famous compared to Instagram? Because it had authenticity. So authenticity is something that is valued very highly over good polish. And because I come from a tech background, and we are all data engineers and geeks, and when we started the process of building a product, we kind of spent a huge amount of time and effort on making sure that the models are accurate, the data is of a really good quality, and everything works really well from a technical point of view. But we didn't really focus on the trust. We didn't really focus on adoption. We didn't really focus on, so human recruiters, they don't want the most accurate model. They want explainability. The compliance guy, he doesn't want accuracy. He wants to see the audit trail. So similarly, hiring managers, they want to talk to the candidate and they want to see. Okay, they want to have a real conversation. So our focus on accuracy should. So in hindsight, I feel that we should have focused on explainability rather than accuracy of the model. We should have focused on adoption rather than getting the best and the most shiny tech out in the field. I think we have done that now in hindsight, and we've been very successful recently. But I just feel that is one thing that if I would go back, I would focus on building trust. I would focus on adoption. I would focus on some of these other factors which build trust with the user and the customer base, and that rather than actually focusing on accuracy of the models and the techie aspects of the solution. Yeah.
And something just picking up on what in James's talk earlier, in JP's talk, he talked about the first 5 years are crucial for businesses, to really get this right. And if we don't get this right, we're going to dramatically get this wrong. Do we think that some companies maybe have already sort of slightly shot themselves in the foot by not getting this sort of steps right? Or do we think actually in this rapid changing world, we don't need as much as 5 years to get it right? Do we think that that's a little bit of a far stretch?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the great thing about this AI wave that we have, is that it's really leveled the playing field for companies, who may be at different stages of the journey. So obviously, being the first mover necessarily doesn't give you all the advantage, because even if you are, like slightly lagging behind, you can actually shortcut some of the processes and go to the latest track rather than having to have all the baggage of broken processes and stuff. So you can directly actually implement the right process from the get-go, using the learnings of other kind of other organizations which have implemented and failed. So I think AI is a great leveler, in my opinion, and it's a 5-year process, which is great. I mean, obviously, but at the same time, organizations who are now starting to look at this, they don't need to have every notch in the belt. They can actually fast forward their journey and bring the right expertise in to actually get on a level playing field with other companies. Yeah.
And Rich?
I think adaptability is key, right? If you are willing, if you're forward-thinking enough to be able to adapt once you've started on that journey, no matter what point in that time period you've started on that journey, if you're willing to adapt and change the way that you think, then I think you've got a good chance of succeeding. If you are very stalwart in your ways and kind of, I've decided that this business is going to be a ChatGPT business and we're not going to use anything other than ChatGPT, you're probably going to have a bit of trouble further down the line when you work out that Claude is better at certain things, or let's not joke about copilots or anything, but like there might be some others that that might be better at things as you move down that journey. So as long as you can adapt, then you'll be fine.
And Sam, have you got anything you want to add on that as well?
Not really.
Not really. Fair enough. Fair enough. I just want to talk about something else that James mentioned, which I thought was really interesting. Is obviously the way that we are moving and transforming workforces, and it's going to move towards this AI organisations. I don't know if this is something that you guys have sort of thought about, are familiar with, and have opinions on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think this AI organization is a great concept, and it's being implemented, I would say, in theory more than in practice. I mean, there's a huge amount of work, that needs to happen, before this can become a reality. Especially, like, okay, so one of the key pieces of information that I think James talked about was context. So, like, and I think when I also started, working with AI and Claude specifically, like, Claude.md file, right? The significance of that file, is massive. So like that's all the context that you have to actually provide the model, in order for the model to actually give a good output. So one is the context. So has the context of any organization been codified in a machine readable or an LLM readable format? I mean, and that's a huge undertaking. If you had that today, yes, you could actually do it, but it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time to codify the context that is required to run an organization into something which is LLM and machine readable. Secondly, there are a lot of cultural nuances right now, because like, you can't, let's say if an organization is already running, with thousands and thousands of people, you can't transform this overnight. There is a there's a human perspective out there. There's a societal, implication. There's a governance aspect out there. There's so much has to change, in order to adopt this kind of mechanism. Now, I think organizations will start moving towards this, rather from pyramid structure that we are all used to. It's going to be a diamond formation. I think James also talked about on the slide very briefly, which is you have your manager, you have people in the middle, who are going to be using some sort of AI, like a copilot kind of a model, and then obviously you will have the point at the bottom, which is like the agents, and these are basically just machines, just doing the work. So, I mean, again, these things are evolving, very, very rapidly at a daily pace, and like a lot of people like myself, James, they're using OpenClaw, and they're just, I was just scratching the surface of this organizational hierarchy, and how agents can actually perform the work of people. But I think we are very far away, I would say, at this point in time for this to become like a mass adopted model, in my opinion.
Yeah, just to kind of round off the conversation as well, you mentioned about human traits, and we have to fiercely protect this. What is it that you guys think that the uniquely human capabilities, the cultural traits, what are these things that leaders need to protect and nurture in order to maintain this balance as the workforce transforms? Sam?
Well, on my side, I think the biggest thing leaders of organizations need to do, at least certainly in my industry, is we need to help our people lean in to their skepticism of AI a little bit. Not to resist it happening, but for it to happen properly. It's our people that will safeguard, and in case our industry, we have investors need to be protected. There's pensions and there's people relying on this happening properly. These people are very good, they're very conscientious, they've been running an industry with very poor tools for a long time, they care deeply about doing it right, and we need to make sure that they safeguard it, that it does happen properly. The example I gave earlier of that company that used AI to do the reporting, they had a team of 20 that went to a team of 2 after we were done. But all of those people their time was better used to do more productive things, and that company is growing 30% a year. And I think that this is where we're going to see change in the place. But we should encourage people to really take very seriously that this happens properly and that everyone's protected that has an interest in it.
So I think one of the most important things that should be nurtured by leadership is that the ability to have those human interactions, right? That's something that is never going away. That's something that's never going to change. A lot of what our business does revolves around kind of auditing and being out in the field, and engineers being with individuals. And one of the things that customers really benefit from is that interaction with the client. Now, we can improve that experience by using AI to write the report for us, and then they can be out in the field and they can have more information, more interactions with clients and things like that. But it's that people, that getting people together and having that interaction between human beings, being able to see the whites of another person's eyes instead of kind of looking at a pad to be able to take notes or whatever else it happens to be. That, I think, is something that we should be nurturing more, and that's a skill that not just the current workforce, but the incoming workforce, you look at what kids that are doing their GCSEs, A-levels today are going to be doing when they make the world of work. I think that is one of those skills that's really important to nurture as we move through.
Anything to add?
I would just say one word, here, which is accountability. I think accountability is something which is extremely important as we move into the AI world. You can outsource a lot of, the manual work to AI, but you cannot outsource accountability. So we need to design processes where I think AI is doing the work, but there is a real person at the end of the process who is actually making a decision and who is accountable for that decision at the end of the day. Yeah, so I think, let's not outsource accountability, and I think that's something as we move into this AI world, as long as we make sure that people are ultimately accountable for the decisions that are being made and the outcomes specifically. And as long as we prioritize that, I think we are in for a really good future, with AI.
Lovely. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Round of applause for these wonderful panelists.